Good evening. The meeting will now be in order. I'm Carmen Reese, 52 Devon Street, Town Moderator. I see that there is a sufficient number of voters present to allow us to open the meeting. This evening, the gymnasium is the only venue for the meeting, and voting will take place only in this room. CCTV's live coverage of the meeting will be broadcast in the cafeteria so that those taking a break may follow along. And I ask all of you to silence your mobile devices. I would like now to invite Fire Chief Tom Judge to tell us what we need to know in the unlikely event of an emergency during the meeting. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. In the event of an emergency, we would ask you to proceed to the exit closest to you. The gymnasium is equipped with 4 exits, one in each corner. 3 of them are well identified. One of them is at the moment obscured by the screen to my left, but it is just beyond that dual county league sign. All 4 exits will get you to the outside, and if you are by chance taking advantage of the child care provided, we would ask you to please proceed to the outside and pick up your children in the courtyard outside of the cafeteria where the child care staff will bring them. The only other thing that we ask is that you please leave the aisles and rows open and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Judge. On behalf of the meeting, I want to thank both the fire department and the police department for their diligent and professional service to us during all 4 nights of the meeting. And on this 4th night of town meeting, I want once again to thank the team that makes town meeting possible, including management and staff from the town manager's office, the town clerk's office, the public works department, the technology department, Boston Light and Sound, who are providing the equipment in the hall this evening, and CCTV, who records and broadcasts the proceedings. But most especially, I want to thank town meeting coordinator Heather Brissett. On Monday night, the meeting elected Ms. Carrie Flood of 1289 Main Street as Deputy Town Moderator. She will take over the duties of the moderator if the moderator is unable to fulfill them. The Deputy Moderator has been sworn to the faithful and impartial discharge of her duties. At the front of the hall on my left is the Board of Selectmen, and to my right is the Finance Committee. These dedicated volunteers have examined the issues before us tonight, and you will hear their recommendations on the articles as they are heard. You will also find the FinCom and Select Board recommendations on the articles in the front of the FinCom report, which is available on the tables in the cafeteria. I would encourage you to spend some time with the FinCom report if you've not already. It's mission-critical information for every citizen. And please note that the full warrant is also incorporated inside of the Finance Committee report. If you have not stopped in the cafeteria to collect materials for tonight's meeting, you will want to do so. Some of the articles may be moved as printed in handouts, and many of the articles are further explained by information on the table. You'll also find on the tables the green booklet entitled Town Meeting Traditions and Procedures. This is a reference guide for our proceedings this evening, and if you do have particular questions on town meeting procedure, I invite you to consult with our able town meeting resource person, Johanna Glazer. Ms. Glazer is seated in the front row. She's now standing and waving, so you know where she is. Thank you, Ms. Glazer. There's also in the cafeteria, on the tables, a questionnaire about town meeting that I very much hope that you'll fill out. We're particularly interested in how you have found the physical arrangements for town meeting, how you have found the town meeting information on the town website, and how helpful you have found the closed captioning supplied for us this year by the amazing Stephanie Farrell. Thank you, Stephanie. The back of the questionnaire invites any comments or suggestions that you may have, and I do invite those. There's a box in the cafeteria for completed questionnaires. You may also drop them off with the town clerk or mail them in later. And you can also download that questionnaire on the town website and fill it out there if you would prefer. So this year I have a fourth opportunity to remind you that the town is always in search of citizens willing to donate their time and talent to the conduct of town affairs. Many boards and committees will need new members right after town meeting. The main qualifications are common sense and a willingness to serve, and I would invite you to fill out a green card to volunteer. You'll find the green cards out on the table in the cafeteria, and you can also find them on the town website. And that's www.concordma.gov. I have appointed Mr. Abe Fisher of 400 Hayward Mill Road to be head teller, Mr. Jim Summer of 15 Pine Street as assistant head teller, Mr. David Carr of 82 Losbrook Road to be ballot supervisor, and Cynthia Rainey of 80 Hunters Ridge Road to be assistant ballot supervisor. Mr. Fisher will supervise a standing vote, counted vote if we require one, and Mr. Carr will supervise the counting of ballots should the meeting vote to take a vote by ballot. Mr. Fisher, are the tellers ready to be sworn?
We are.
Mr. Carr, are the ballot counters ready to be sworn?
We are.
Thank you. Tellers and ballot counters, would you all please stand and raise your right hand? Does each of you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform your respective duties at town meeting? Thank you all. On behalf of the meeting, I thank Mr. Fisher, Mr. Summer, Ms. Rainey, and Mr. Carr, and all of the tellers and ballot counters for performing this vital function for us at town meeting. And do remember that your own votes need to be counted too. All voters should have received a voting slip when they checked in. It looks like this tonight. Every night it's a different color. Your voting slip is what identifies you as a registered Concord voter and enables you to vote. Please write your name on your slip to keep track of it, but you might not want to write it on the secret ballot part, maybe on the top. Visitors to our town meeting should be registered in the cafeteria. They should be wearing a visitor badge, and unless they have permission from the moderator to sit elsewhere, they should be in the visitors section, which is that part of the bleachers closest to the door to the cafeteria. We also have with us this evening Town Council, Mina Makarios of Anderson and Krieger, and we will ask him to address the meeting if we have a legal question tonight. He got lots of action last night. We will now turn our attention to the annual town meeting warrant. Once again, please be sure that you've silenced your mobile devices. We concluded with action on Article 40 last night, and tonight the first article that we'll take up will be Article 41. I'll ask all of the presenters on tonight's articles to note their prearranged presentation time will appear on the countdown clock on the screen, and the lights on the podium will flash yellow when there's 30 seconds left and red when there are 10 seconds remaining. When we open the floor for comments and questions, you're welcome to approach a microphone. All the microphones are at the front of the hall. When your microphone number is called, please state your name and address and wait to be recognized. Tonight we have no pro or con microphones. There is one accessible microphone at a lower height, which is available to any speaker. And each speaker from the floor also will have 2 minutes, and the clock on the screen will track that time as well. Tonight, we convene as a legislative body with a moderator presiding. We conduct ourselves with civility, and there's no place in our proceedings for clapping, booing, or other demonstrations. Your questions and comments are made on behalf of the entire assembly, and they should be addressed to the moderator and not to the speaker on the podium. Let us also keep in mind as we begin this, our fourth night of deliberations, that all of us are members of a community, our town of Concord, and that communities thrive on honest and open dialogue, a willingness to listen, and mutual respect, even when, and perhaps especially when, emotions run high. Before we take up Article 41, I want to note that on Article 8, which we heard on the first night of town meeting, there was a discrepancy in the materials on the screen of $30. And so I want to clarify for us that the correct number, it's wonderful to have such astute citizens here at town meeting, because one of you noticed that and brought it to our attention to make sure that we corrected it, made a note on the record so that we have no problem with the vote at a later time. So the correct number was $742,679, and that was on Article 8, Minuteman Regional Technical High School District budget. There were some places where a number $30 less than that somehow had ended up in the slides, but that was the correct number. And we'll now proceed to Article 41.
Thank you. Brooke Whiting Cash, 1114 Lowell Road, member of the Planning Board and speaking on behalf of the Planning Board. Article 41 involves a tree preservation bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. If approved, this article will insert a specific reference to a protected tree impact and removal permit in various locations in the tree preservation bylaw that was approved by town meeting 2017. Next slide, please. Since adoption of the residential tree preservation bylaw in 2017, the Planning Board and town staff of several departments have worked many hours developing and refining the process and procedures by which the bylaw will be implemented. The Planning Board has approved the tree preservation rules and regulations after several public meetings and a public hearing on the topic. The tree preservation bylaw is now in effect. Next slide, please. This amendment will not change any of the conditions or parameters of the tree preservation bylaw as approved last year. It adds reference to a specific permit that has been deemed necessary for implementation of the bylaw and will help reduce any confusion between the bylaw and the rules and regulations. Next slide, please. Please support the Planning Board's efforts and take affirmative action on Article 41 as printed in the warrant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Whiting Cash. So the motion is to take affirmative action on Article 41 as printed in the warrant. That is on the screen now. Do we have a second for the motion? I see that we do. And the quantum of vote necessary on this, since it is a general bylaw and not a zoning bylaw, is a majority vote. Do we have questions or comments from the floor? Seeing none, I think we're prepared for a vote on Article 41. All those in favor? Thank you very much. All those opposed? The motion carries. The motion carries almost unanimously, and I do so declare. Having addressed Articles 42 and 43 on the consent calendar, we will now proceed to Article 44. Article 44 is a citizen petition for a moratorium on the implementation of Natural Resources Commission dog restrictions on conservation land. And we'll hear from Mr. Shobries.
I'm Don Shobries, 7 Right Farm. I'm a member of the Dog Park Feasibility Study Committee, but am speaking on my own behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Shobries.
Thank you. This article was drafted prior to the adoption of additional dog restrictions on conservation lands by the NRC in December of 2017 and is intended to include them. The article is also non-binding. So the NRC is free to accept or reject any or all of the suggestions made today. Next slide. Okay. Both sides are frustrated, fatigued, and emotional. We had many meetings with little convergence. Also, going forward, collaboration is more efficient than coercion or conflict. This is the basis for community policing, which emphasizes active engagement. Next slide. For months, we've heard conflicting opinions on conditions here in Concord. We have heard many strong statements, but there is a lack of data specific to Concord. There's not even data on how frequently dog owners and their dogs visit these parcels. The NRC's presentation to the Select Board in January did not identify the specific problems being addressed or any measures of success. This makes it hard to understand what their concerns are. If you don't have agreement on the problem, or at least a clear problem statement, it's hard to get agreement on the solution. Next slide. Oops, I'm sorry. 25% of the households in Concord, about 1,500 in number, own dogs, and they're losing privileges they've enjoyed for decades. The restrictions imposed by the NRC are on top of the restrictions imposed by private landowners at Estherbrook. Dog owners have a real sense of loss and are wondering what will happen next. According to the National Institute of Health and the Center for Disease Control, adults and children living with dogs have healthier lives. They get fewer allergies and are better able to withstand serious diseases. The New York Times recently reported that a large-scale study found that dog owners live longer. Our local veterinarians will tell you that, in return for these benefits, our dogs need off-leash exercise and socialization. The NRC has referred to the precautionary principle in invoking these restrictions. This allows taking action under uncertainty, but most definitions say there needs to be evidence that a significant threat exists. There are still issues of science and data. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which won a Nobel Prize for its work, said, quote, "The precautionary principle is considered when possibly dangerous, irreversible, or catastrophic effects are identified," unquote. The NRC uses climate change and DDT as examples. The threat with climate change is a tremendous dislocation of human activities, and there is a great deal of data that shows that the Earth is getting warmer. In addition, the chemistry behind climate change was discovered in the mid-1800s. The uncertainty is around predicting when and where specific effects will occur. With DDT, the threat was extinction of predatory birds like eagles, and there was data showing that DDT lingers in the environment, gets more concentrated as you move up the food chain, and then disrupts reproduction in predatory birds. So what is the evidence of a dangerous, irreversible, or catastrophic threat posed by dogs off-leash? Next slide. A moratorium provides a cooling off period. Mediation would help both sides break out of unproductive patterns of interaction. It also provides an opportunity to educate dog owners to improve etiquette. Most importantly, it provides an opportunity to collect data that defines a baseline for measuring the effectiveness of any restrictions. Without this, there is no objective way of measuring the impact of the NRC's restrictions. Next slide. Let's see. The moratorium provides time to collect data to resolve conflicting opinions. This is an opportunity to clearly define the problems being addressed here in Concord and provide measures of success. No one is asking the NRC to do expensive studies. The only data shared by the NRC were reports from the Concord Summer Ranger program that did not provide any specific information on how often or how many dogs were encountered off-leash, or how often and how much dog waste was found. Las Cruces, New Mexico did a simple dog waste study for $850, which identified problem areas, proposed corrective measures, and provided a baseline for assessing improvements. Their methods could easily be incorporated into the Ranger program, which cost $20,000 last year. The 2015 Open Space and Recreation Plan tasks the Department of Natural Resources with baseline data collection. Over the past 4 decades, other communities and organizations have reduced the cost and staff manpower required to capture this type of data by engaging citizens in collaborative data collection efforts called citizen science. This engagement could include dog owners who currently work with the Department of Natural Resources on trails and invasives. Next slide. It's 2018. Can we move forward with a collaborative, fact-based approach? Note, I have not precluded any options. I'm just acting that our path forward be collaborative and based on data. I thank you for your attention, and I ask for your support.
Thank you very much. We'll hear from Jeff Adams from the Natural Resources Commission.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Adams, 142 Farmers Cliff Road, member of the Natural Resources Commission and speaking for the Commission.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The NRC is responsible for preserving and protecting town conservation land. 4 of the 5 commissioners are current or recent dog owners and regularly walk on town conservation land. State law authorizes the NRC to establish rules and regulations, and the NRC has responsibly implemented rules to protect Concord's conservation lands since 1974. Our goal is to ensure that all trail users have a safe and enjoyable experience and that our conservation lands are protected. The NRC began an extensive public process with a hearing last May and discussed dogs at 17 public meetings, including 9 exclusively on dogs, and a summary was presented to the Select Board in January. During this process, we sought feedback from numerous groups and the public at large. We reviewed bylaws and regulations of other communities and land management organizations, and we reviewed scientific literature about the effects of dogs on wildlife and food safety rules. The NRC recommended that dogs be on leash on 15% of the 1,400 acres of town conservation land. And we dug deeper and evaluated a subset of town conservation lands with trails that are the most popular walking areas. More than 70% of those trails, shown in green on this map, remain open to off-leash dog walking. During the public process, we learned a great deal. About 20% of Concord's community owns at least 1 dog, and they love them passionately. Numerous trail users, including dog walkers, reported negative experiences of off-leash dogs. Ownership of the Estabrook Woods was a source of great confusion. Of the 1,400 acres of Estabrook Woods, only 115 acres are public and under NRC control. 90% is privately owned. Among the scientific community and land managers, it is accepted that some dogs can affect some species of wildlife. As our population grows and more people and dogs are using trails, wildlife have fewer places to live safely. And as other towns and organizations impose restrictions, more pressure is placed on Concord's open spaces to accommodate off-leash dogs. And we found that there was no clear definition of effective dog control, and that signage and communication can be improved, and that dog waste continues to be a problem on trails. After extensive review and discussion, the NRC developed a set of common sense rules to clarify effective dog control, and those rules were mailed to all registered dog owners and available on the table out front. After careful consideration, the NRC implemented leash restrictions at Punkatasset because of its high-value natural habitat, and to prevent overuse by off-leash dog walking due to the adjoining property's leash restrictions, and because Estabrook Woods was intended to be protected as a nature preserve. On town food-producing conservation farmlands, a leash requirement was enacted to help farmers comply with new federal regulations associated with dog waste. And existing leash regulations at White Pond to protect erodible slopes and to preserve water quality, and a seasonal restriction at Madison Field to protect ground nesting birds remain in effect. We understand that some dog owners are disappointed by the leash rules. However, we believe that most Concord citizens, including dog walkers, understand the need for sound land management so that our conservation land is welcoming to all users and protective of the wildlife that call these lands home. The NRC urges no action on Article 44. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll hear from Mr. Steve Verrill from the Agricultural Committee.
Stephen Verrill, 415 Plainfield Road, member of the Agriculture Committee, speaking for the committee.
Mr. Verrill.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm going to be quite brief. Massachusetts is different. They talk about the federal food safety regulations. In Massachusetts, we've opted to do our own, well, we haven't, but the state has, to do our own version of the regulation. I have 32 pages of the audit report right here that they use when they go around to check farms. And I think we have page 9 on the screen, which says specifically that pets should be kept out of food-producing areas. That seems to be kind of an open and shut case. Active farming and food production has been a vital part of Concord's history and character. We'd like to see it remain in place so that people are able to get some fresh, local produced food when they enjoy the open space that produced it. The Concord Agricultural Committee and the Concord farmers are recommending no action on this article so that we can continue to provide healthful food to our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verrill, and we'll hear from Mr. Steve Ing from the Select Board.
Steve Ing, 12 Dalton Road, member of the Select Board, speaking on the board's behalf.
Mr. Ing.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Select Board, by a vote of 4-1, recommend no action on Article 44. The primary role of the NRC is to protect and preserve our natural resources. They are the town's designated stewards of our conservation lands. If the integrity of these lands are jeopardized by development or activity, they are obligated to do whatever they deem necessary to protect those resources. The Select Board believes the process in which the NRC developed the regulations for requiring dogs to be leashed at specific conservation areas to be sound and appropriate. It was discussed at several commission meetings and hearings dedicated to this issue. Despite all the public's participation and heartfelt correspondence received and heard by the Commission and the Select Board as well, the regulations enacted were not well received by many. The approval of a moratorium this evening, although non-binding, undermines the very process and essence of the role that our Commission plays in how Concord protects and manages our conservation lands. We ask this body to consider the NRC is duty-bound to address any impacts that may compromise a property, and that could be from many issues, be it development, erosion, or impact by visitors. This may require changes to the regulations to protect and restore the site. If their process can be affected or changed by public preferences and perceived entitlements, how can our conservation lands be ever ensured to survive? Throughout this year's town meeting, there have been many speakers who praise and support the concepts of sustainability and resiliency. These are not just buzzwords to the NRC or notions that can be put aside when they impact our personal lifestyles. These are guiding principles used in making difficult decisions to preserve our lands for our enjoyment today and in the future. For this, we owe the staff of the Natural Resources Division and its commission our thanks and gratitude. The Select Board recommends no action on Article 44. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ing. So we have the motion on the screen that Mr. Shobries moves that the town vote to urge the Natural Resources Commission to adopt a 2-year moratorium on implementing any new NRC dog restrictions on conservation land. We need a second on the motion. I see that we have one. And we'll now open the floor to questions and comments. Microphone number 1.
Carmen Jacquier, 38 Shore Drive. Mr. Shobries, in his description of the moratorium, said that it would allow time for owners to improve dog etiquette. And I wondered what he meant by that and how he envisioned that being carried out.
Mr. Shobries, would you like to address that?
Basically, by carrying out an education, 2 things. One is to carry out an education program for dog owners. And second thing is to use the dog owners in the community as active role models in terms of what appropriate behavior is. I can fully appreciate the fact that there are a lot of people that aren't comfortable with dogs. I appreciate the fact that people don't want dogs jumping up on them. Those are things that you can easily train your dog not to do, okay? And people don't always realize, I mean, they have a strong emotional bond with their animal. They don't necessarily realize that bond isn't universal. And you have to educate dog owners to that end.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
George Corrett, 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So what is this really about? I've been in Concord about 30 years, and I'm trying to figure out what really changed so radically but anyway, what this means to me personally is at Punkatasket, wandering with the dogs off-leash and also off-trail really was one of the formative experiences of my son's life. And to build his confidence and interest in nature, and in particular, think about the off-trail aspects. Now, maybe it's illegal to be off-trail. I'm not sure about that, because we heard, Madam Moderator, the phrase trails, trails, trails. Stay on the beaten path. Don't wander off. Don't discover. Now, it happens that Mink Pond, the beavers up there, and the beaver dams and everything like that is a unique, a very unique area, unlike many other places, unless you go to Maine. So that I feel most strongly that the restrictions on Punkatasket are also motivated to ameliorate a situation where private landowners don't want to mark their property. And I want people to take out of their mind criminal behaviors that we've seen, people going to people's houses and that sort of trespassing activity. That's not what we're talking about, but I think some of these restrictions are in reaction to that. They're reactionary, they're fearful. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Madam Moderator, I'm Dean Sullender. I live at 64 Bayberry Road.
Mr. Sellender.
Thank you. Madam Moderator, I like dogs. I think they make the best animal companions for us. I also plan to vote for no action on this article, and I have 2 reasons. First, I have concerns about wildlife damage. We know that dogs are predators in the wildlife food chain. In conservation lands, dogs mark the habitat with urine and feces and often chase the remaining wildlife. We know that uncontrolled dogs are one of the reasons we see no more ground nesting birds like pheasants and grouse. When's the last time you saw a pheasant in our fields? How is that we protect the habitat and then harass or kill its inhabitants. Second, for the last 35 years, I've been a jogger on the Concord and Lincoln trails. I will now describe my own experiences there with dogs. For me, this provides sufficient quantitative evidence to enact these rules without delay. When running, I am respectful of people with their dogs. I try to run at least 10 feet away on trails and sidewalks. Occasionally, when I meet someone on the trails with a dog, the owner will pull the dog close with a short leash. For that courtesy, I always try to say thank you as I pass. Some people say dogs are better behaved when off leash. That is certainly not my experience. Typically, a young dog off leash will charge at me, barking, and force me to stop and decide how to protect myself. Rarely have I seen any off-leash dog obey a voice command to stop when it is running at me. In those years while running, I've received 2 significant dog bites from off-leash dogs, leaving me with small scars. In both cases, the embarrassed owners replied, "Oh, I'm so sorry, he's never done that before." Many times when a dog has lunged towards me and I am motionless with the dog growling and its teeth bared, I hear, "Oh, he won't bother you." With or without these regulations, I advocate for an increase in awareness and empathy in Concord on the part of people when their pets are outdoors. We should remember to be good neighbors with good manners. Isn't it rather rude and selfish to abandon control of your dog if it will harass wildlife or confront others enjoying the woods?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sullender.
Thank you.
Microphone number 4.
Gregor McGregor, 70 Williams Road.
Mr.
Madam
McGregor.
Moderator. I've only lived in Concord 20 years, but for 50 years I've been in the field of environmental law, land use control, and municipal government in Massachusetts. I've come to know how other public and private agencies owning and managing land restrict or prohibit dogs. In summary, Concord would be well within its rights to outright prohibit dogs from conservation lands. Concord would be regarded as generous if it allowed dogs and required they be on leash. Briefly, in Minuteman National Park, all pets must be on leash no longer than 6 feet, and owners must bring plastic bags and remove the waste. In the Appalachian Trail, the section in the National Park Service, all dogs must be leashed. In the Cape Cod National Seashore, pets of all kinds must be on 6-foot leashes at all times, and they're banned in posted locations or in posted seasons because of wildlife. In the Acadia National Park, pets must be restrained on a leash no longer than 6 feet. In Yellowstone, pets must be kept under physical control at all times, caged, crated, or on a leash not to exceed 6 feet. In Walden Pond State Reservation, no dogs or pets. On Mount Monadnock, no pets allowed in the park. By the way, people used to walk their dogs on and off leash all the way to the top with saddlebags on some of those wonderful pets, but because of the problems the NRC has invoked, and the last speaker mentioned, the rules are now no dogs. Finally, on the survey I conducted, I see that as of this week, the State Division of Fisheries and Wildlife is one step closer to regulating dogs on its 200,000 acres. The Fisheries and Wildlife
Mr.
Board
McGregor, you'll need to wrap it up.
voted Wednesday to require all dogs on leash unless they are actively hunting or being trained.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Tracy Wynn, 404 Monument Street.
Ms. Wynn.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. You know something has gone dreadfully awry when the NRC's process, when an orthodox, devout, and practicing environmentalist stands to ask you to vote for this moratorium. I attended all of the NRC's dog-related meetings and hearings, except one poop subcommittee meeting. The NRC had a chance to enlist the help of the dog-owning population of our town for the betterment of all. Instead, dog owners attending those meetings were interrupted, bullied, shut down, and patronized by members of the commission. If that sounds unlikely, please listen to the tapes of the proceedings. I invited the commission to accompany me and my 1-year-old dog on a conservation walk so they could see what voice control looks like. People who don't have dogs or don't train their dogs need to see it to understand that it works. I am in the woods of Concord with my dog between 7 and 14 hours a week. I know and love the terrain and its natural inhabitants. My dog is trained not to disturb them. Late in the fall, one of the commissioners accepted my invitation to Punkatassett so she could say they had done due diligence. As we walked, she said she had never been there before. Maybe many of the people in this room know and love Punkatassett as well as they know and love their own kitchens. At least one of the 5 commissioners we were supposed to trust had never seen Punkatassett except on a map. Reaching a conclusion before a decision-making process begins, or without knowledge of what you are regulating, is no way to govern, whether the issue is leashing dogs or any other regulation that affects everyone in this town. For government to work, the cooperation of the governed is required. Now we have a real mess. 1,200 to 1,500 dog owners who are feeling an acute personal loss of habitat as the result of a failed, flawed, and disrespectful process. Instead of fighting—
And I'm sorry, Ms. Wynn, I am going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Instead of fighting this moratorium, the NRC should be embracing it as a second chance. Please vote for this article and let's give cooperation a chance.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1. Now, please, let's remember that this is a legislative body, and we will have a civil discourse here, and we will not have demonstrations, no matter how we feel on either side of an issue. And please remember that's especially important when emotions run high. Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Yes, Thomas Lage, 38 Shore Drive.
Mr. Lange.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have had the privilege for the last 10 years of having a bird's eye view of the White Pond Beach, which is, I note from one of the sheet's maps, is an area that requires dogs on leash at all times. Now, mostly when I look out the window, I see dogs off leash at any time of the year, winter, summer, and fall, not when the beach season is there because the lifeguards control the dogs, but they're only there from 9 in the morning till 7 in the afternoon at the latest. I'm sure no Concord dog owners bring their dogs there and let them run without a leash. But when I first moved there 10 years ago, there was a sign that said dogs must be leashed, and it was shortly thereafter destroyed and vandalized, and there hasn't been one since. So it must be people from outside the town who bring their dogs to the White Pond Beach and let them run loose. And I'm wondering how any type of Concord dog owner training is going to affect people who come from outside the town to bring their dogs to places like White Pond and probably Punkatassett. So I'm voting no action on Article 44, and I believe, if anything, we're not enforcing the rules that we already have, let alone the ones that the NRC just recently established.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
Thomas Sattler, 51 Chestnut Street, Concord.
Mr. Sattler.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So I have a question, which is, this says no new restrictions. My wife has been to Punkatassett in the last week, and there are signs up there that say you must have your dog on a leash. So is this saying new from here on, or would it request that you would remove that?
Mr. Showbreeze, do you want to address that?
The request was for a moratorium on that decision. Okay. And the NRC has obviously taken action.
So it would, okay. So having heard Mr. Lage speak, I actually support Article 44 because I think we have confused enforcement with new laws. The man who spoke 3 before me talked about Acadia National Park, the national park here, all of these places that have restrictions. I have walked with my dog on a leash and off a leash. There has been no enforcement for any of those. I think we've gotten another eyewitness example of the inability for this town to enforce the bylaws that it already has, which says voice control or on a leash. I believe that's correct. And so adding more laws to this doesn't do us any good. It actually creates a disservice. Let me just ask people in this audience, how many of you drive 45 miles an hour on Route 2 going through Concord? So there's a great example, and I see your smile, of how we have a law that nobody pays attention to. Here's another example of laws, of rules that people don't pay attention to. The town would do a much better job of spending money to educate people out of town, to do the things that we're supposed to do. And I think if the NRC had enlisted the dog owners, I've attended many meetings, I've written to the paper, I've written to the letters to the editor. If they had enlisted us, we would have helped them educate the others about the importance of controlling your dog. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Neil Ryder, 96 The Valley Road.
Mr. Whited.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So I am a dog owner, and I'm also an enthusiastic user of the wealth of trails and conservation land that we have in the area. I'm out pretty well every day of the year with a very energetic dog running and or walking. And actually, because of this, I am opposed to Article 44, because I think it is actually detrimental to the long-term interests of dog owners in this town. Yes, this is actually about sustainability, such a popular word at the moment. However much we love our dogs, and I certainly do, I think we have to accept they do need to be kept under adequate control. They are natural predators. They do chase, they do hunt and harass wildlife and farm animals. They do, on occasion, attack other dogs. And actually, we have experienced this with our dogs on a couple of occasions, happening to them by aggressive dogs not under control. And then there's people. Not everybody likes dogs. Some people are frightened of them, especially small children, and with very good reason. You know, apart from allergic reactions to stinging insects, dogs are the deadliest animal in America. And actually, upwards of 30 people a year are killed. 30 Americans a year are killed by dogs. So in my view, a knee-jerk reaction to any kind of control measures, and I think these are pretty reasonable, or ignoring existing regulations, this is not doing us any service, either with the community and even less with landowners. So I will be voting against this article.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Jeff Young, 264 Bedford Street. I'm
Mr.
a member
Young?
thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm a member of the Dog Park Feasibility Study Group, but I'm here to speak on my own behalf.
Thank you.
You know, I've been part of the whole process from day one, from May 11th, when Delia first announced the possible potential restrictions, and it was especially alarming because it fell on the heels of the news that Estabrook Woods would no longer be available for off-leash dog walking, and to hear then that the town was also embarking on this campaign felt a little tone deaf to its citizens, to its dog owners. It was really alarming. So a lot of people got their fur ruffled, to use a bad pun. But you know, I know Delia, I know the NRC, and a lot of the select board. They're reasonable people. So we organized, met with them privately, then began a series of sessions with them, as they said, 17 meetings. But our sense during these meetings was that we weren't really being that heard. I had created a petition online which got about 1,200 signatures. It got over 500 signatures in just 2 days from local residents, and with their commentary. And I was told that they thought it was a joke. You know, we tried to present them with what, you know, reasonable set of expectations for dogs. You know, pet etiquette. You know, we were happy to work with them, and we still are, to keep dog behavior from attacking anybody or killing another 30 Concordians like last year, I guess. But anyhow, it's a shame they missed this opportunity to work with us, because the town, if they had engaged us, we would have been able to walk away from this happy and not have to ask for a moratorium.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Richard Waters, 65 Captain Miles Lane.
Mr. Waters.
I'd just like to comment as a citizen of Concord. I think it's important to understand that much of this commentary we've just been hearing and much of the energy pro and con is not actually about what this article is about. This article is not seeking to change the decision the NRC has already made. It's made that decision. This article is seeking that over the next 2 years, we see what is the effect of this, hopefully gather more additional information, and be able to have a very good process for whatever decision the NRC is making in future years. Whereas most of the commentary has been about the past that this article is not about. For instance, Mr. Adams and Mr. Verrill did a spirited defense of the decision the NRC made. They made a decision to have leashes some places and to not have leashes other places. And this article is just requesting that we see what plays out from that decision before we have an additional decision. So I hope that we will all vote for this Article 44.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1.
Kate Hennighausen, 245 The Valley Road.
Yes, please.
I never knew I was such a criminal. I think everyone should know that part of these new regulations involve a $100 fine for off-leash walking in the woods. $100? This is on par with texting while driving. I would like all of you to question whether or not policing dog walkers in the woods is a very useful time and energy effort on the part of our town. I spend hours walking miles all around town. I've had great interactions with other dog walkers, hikers, cyclists, skiers, joggers. I've found many people to be baffled by this very alarming change in the management of our public lands. So I am supporting Article 44, again, in hopes that we can continue to work together to find more practical solutions to the problems that face our conservation lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End.
Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It's nice to see a balanced discussion on this topic. We're getting pro and con on a fairly regular basis. I'll be the con at this point. I'm going to urge my fellow legislators to vote against Article 44 because of what it does and what it will do. A moratorium on any new dog restrictions, that language would prohibit any new dog restrictions. That can be very broad, and we don't know what kind of issues will be coming up. Furthermore, it affects the conservation land, and it's very convenient having this map that we had as a handout showing the different types of conservation land restrictions at different levels. The dogs under effective control, the leash required at all times, the seasonal leash restrictions. I found out I live near the property where it is dogs under effective control. If there's an issue going forward with dogs unleashed that are harassing my family, the wildlife that comes onto my property, or that cause a disturbance, I want to be able to call the NRC and complain about this. And if it's bad enough, I want them to change the rules. This moratorium will tie their hands. They've done a great process. They've gone through done what they needed to do. And that's why I think this article is inappropriate, overly broad, and should be defeated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Terry Rothermel, 330 Musketequid Road.
Mr. Rothermel.
Thank you. I support this article to have a moratorium on further dog control regulations by our Natural Resources Commission. This is the kind of divisive issue that should have been destined for our town meeting in the first place. National Resources Commission could have better waived its powers and brought it to this legislative body. I, too, have personally attended many meetings as this process evolved over the last 2 years. It has been a very one-sided process, with many dog lovers and their energetic dogs on the losing side. Note the domino effect in about what I'm about to say. First, there was the Estabrook Woods Committee. They worked for a full year. It sadly ended in stalemate as the abutters continually threatened to sue the town over public access issues, and thus intimidated the rest of that citizen committee. Next, Harvard mysteriously decided to follow the path of Estabrook Road and dog leashing. Last, our own Natural Resources Commission followed suit, telegraphing their final position from the start. There were hearings, but there was little evidence of a change in mind. Several generations of Concordians have voted to purchase our conservation lands. I can't remember any mention of the Natural Resources Commission exercising its statutory powers to this degree after our lands were conserved. What's wrong with pursuing more information?
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Krista Collins, 55 Highland Street.
One more time.
Krista Collins, 55 Highland
Ms.
Street.
Collins, thank you.
I work as the Director of Land Protection for a regional land trust called Sudbury Valley Trustees. SVT is a nonprofit that protects and manages conservation land for people and wildlife in 36 communities between Boston and Worcester, including Concord. Managing the impacts of dogs on conservation land is not an issue isolated to Concord. My coworkers who care for our lands have expressed concern many times that dog walking on all conservation lands has significantly increased in recent years. Sudbury Valley trustees and our partners at other conservation organizations are challenged by the negative impacts that this increase is having on natural resources and on visitor experience. At every meeting or conference that SVT land management staff has attended in the last several years, the issue of dog management has been raised as a problem. At one of SVT's very popular reservations in Sudbury, we were experiencing significant problems with visitors failing to clean up after their dogs. One of our AmeriCorps members conducted an experiment in which she flagged every pile of dog waste along the trail. There were 88 incidences within 3 feet of the trail on a relatively short walking loop. Gross. On another reservation where a bridge crossed a stream, we had problems with dogs running in and out of the stream and causing erosion, impacting sensitive habitat for native brook trout, among other species. I use these 2 examples to illustrate that while one dog individually may not have an impact on conservation, the collective actions of many dogs repeating such behaviors day after day can have significant impacts to water quality, to wildlife, and wildlife habitat. We're lucky to live in a community with many beautiful conservation areas. I've been a dog owner and appreciate how much easier it is to walk and enjoy these lands with a dog off leash. But in this, as with so many environmental issues, each of us needs to start thinking harder about sacrificing some personal conveniences for the greater good. Today, with so many threats to our natural environment that seem overwhelming and out of our control, here is something that we do have the power to control. 70% of conservation lands still remain open to off-leash dog walking. I support the NRC's hard work and urge no action on Article 44.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Shobries at this point. I think we've heard a couple of different views from speakers about exactly what the effect of a yes vote on your article would be. Would you just remind us, please, what the effect of a yes vote on your article would be?
It's true.
As I said, this is a non-binding article, and this is a request for cooperation and consideration from the NRC. And the yes vote would be an indication of state of mind of the community. So it would be a request from the community for considerations along the lines outlined in the article. Does that answer the question?
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Ann Hayden, 342 Sudbury Road.
Ms. Hayden.
Thank you. This warrant article urges town meeting to request that the Natural Resources Commission delay for 2 years the implementation of the new dog restrictions. However, neither town meeting nor the select board have authority over the NRC. Massachusetts state law decrees that only the NRC has the regulatory responsibility to determine how our town will manage our conservation land. The NRC carries out their responsibilities admirably. With respect to dogs, the NRC has spent over a year researching the issue, listening to citizens' concerns and opinions, reviewing what other communities have done, and holding a public hearing. Their process was transparent, thorough, fair, and open to all. The NRC has balanced its responsibility as steward of Concord's conservation land with the desires of all town residents to walk safely on our trails and the desires of dog owners to let their dogs run off-leash. Change is never easy, and the controversy that has raged for the past year over this issue is not healthy for our community. Dog restrictions are here to stay, and many of our neighboring communities have already put in place restrictions that are more restrictive than ours. Instead of fighting the new dog restrictions, I urge dog owners to take a more positive approach. I have two suggestions. Live with these new restrictions for 2 years and then make recommendations for improvements. And the second one is that last night at town meeting, we approved $25,000 for a study of future uses for 2229 Main Street, the land which is large and a perfect location for both a dog exercise area and trails for walking dogs off-leash. I urge all dog owners to get involved with the committee that will be determining what will happen there. In conclusion, I support the important work of the Natural Resources Commission. Please vote no on Article 44.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6. You can, yeah, okay.
Carol Aronson, 7 Wright Farm.
Yes, Ms. Aronson.
Thank you. My husband and I have actively supported the local farmers in town. We've spoken to veterinarians and local farmers that say dogs are not a health threat to crops.
Can you get just a little closer to that microphone? Thank you.
We've spoken to, is that better?
Yes.
Veterinarians and local farmers that say dogs are not a health threat to crops. Some farmers are against the restrictions, but are not comfortable disagreeing publicly with the NRC. The handout on the table shows the link to the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act final rule on produce safety. And I quote, "As was stated in the supplemental notice, farms are not required to exclude animals from outdoor growing areas, destroy animal habitat, or clear borders around growing or drainage areas. Nothing in the rule should be interpreted as requiring or encouraging such actions," unquote. A larger health threat is from wild animals, particularly wild birds that can fly over barriers, who are in and about those fields 24 hours a day and receive no veterinary care, while most dogs in Concord receive monthly doses of anti-parasitic medications, annual veterinary visits, and spend limited amounts of time on conservation land. Dogs shouldn't trample seedlings, but many farmers are increasingly fencing fields to protect against wild animals and pilferage. This creates an opportunity for reasonable accommodation. Restrictions on agricultural lands is not about food safety. It's about restricting dogs. Will the dogs of farmers and their employees also be restricted to being on leash? Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2. That's you.
That's me.
Yeah.
Stephen Verrill speaking, I guess for myself officially.
Mr. Verrill.
I'd like to clarify the comments as I showed earlier. The regulations that apply to us in Massachusetts do prohibit pets from agricultural land, in contrast to what was previously just mentioned. That is not the case in Massachusetts. They're right here if anybody would care to come and look at them. And we do a tremendous amount to keep wildlife off. I know a lot of people have said, well, why keep dogs off when wildlife go anyway? It was mentioned that wildlife are there 24 hours a day and dogs are only a couple hours a day, but I think dogs generally go out to exercise their bodies and the bladders and the bowels, but so maybe their hours are a little more productive. And but the main thing, the regulation that Massachusetts farmers have to abide by does prohibit pets on farmland.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Catherine Angel, 267 Main Street.
Ms. Angel.
I'm going to vote against this article, and I have a few points that I'd like to use to describe why. One is an incident that happened within the last 10 days on one of the conservation properties in town, a time when Concord dog owners presumably are very, very sensitive to the fact that they need to control their dogs and to make sure that their dogs behave when they're on conservation land. My husband and I were walking on this land. We were returning to the parking lot. A dog owner was with her dog off leash. Presumably she thought it was under voice control near the parking lot. The dog ran down the hill and jumped up on me. It was quite a large dog, and I don't know what breed it was. It was sort of a pit bull, bulldog kind of looking dog. I was aware that the land we were on was supposed to have voice control or dogs on leash, so went up to the woman in the parking lot in case she didn't know about that. And she was extremely rude. This ended up being the single most unpleasant incident I have had with a dog owner the entire 34 years I've been walking in Concord Woods. She basically said to me, "It's a dog, get over it." She said the rules were ridiculous. She repeated several times that it was my problem. And what my husband and I both took from this was basically because she had a dog and wanted it off leash and it wasn't responding to her voice commands, that's just, we should expect to be jumped on. This to us was a good example of why saying that dog owners should have their dogs under voice control, but don't need to have them leashed is not sufficient to ensure that the majority of Concord residents who don't own dogs, or even if they do own dogs, don't want to be jumped on by other people's dogs. So it turned out it was a Concord dog owner, and we were very surprised that this is the best that this owner could do in this situation. Her dog finally did come back to her after she screamed quite a bit at it, but it was not under control.
I am very sorry, you are out of time.
Okay.
Microphone number 4.
David Ropeek, 21 Baker Avenue.
Mr. Ropeek.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. I want to commend the stenographer for putting laughter in parentheses for the previous speaker. Nicely done. And say hello to my friends and neighbors. This has been a divisive issue, and I wasn't planning on speaking on it at all, but it occurred to me that there's something broader than the dogs themselves that everybody's been talking about. The moratorium would serve as a cooling off period for a lot of mistrust in town government and division that exists. There's a poisoned relationship going forward on a lot of other things too that bears on how much, not openness and transparency, but legitimate listening people feel. Now, whether the NRC, I commend them. They worked hard. They were open. I shared a lot of information with them. I was engaged. They listened. They took. They agreed. They disagreed. That's not the point. How much hearing actually happened? We've heard other speakers say that. So I would commend people to think about voting for this measure, as I am thinking of too, because it would give us a chance to reset what has become a poisoned relationship between the town and its government, having way more to do with the future of Concord than just the dog issue itself.
Thank you. Microphone number 5.
Dory Keogh, 51 MacArthur Road.
Ms. Kehoe.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have an admission to make. I am very, very afraid of dogs, but I love to walk on Concord conservation lands, and your dog bounding toward me and greeting really terrifies me. You know your dog is friendly, but I don't. I recently spotted the very large political signs in town with a dog in the role of Uncle Sam saying, "I need you to help keep our conservation lands open for all to enjoy." Exactly, I said, all. That's the word, and that means compromise and balance. During these past months, the NRC has spent hundreds of volunteer hours carrying out its statutory obligation to protect and preserve conservation land, and arrived at its decision after many, many hours of listening and studying the current and expected effect of more dogs on these lands. This, by the way, is the first warrant article that I can ever remember which is so challenging of the authority and goodwill of a board, and which seeks to control actions into the future. This troubles me greatly. But to the issue at hand, according to the town clerk, slightly less than 1/4 of Concord households have registered dogs. And even with the new leashing regulations, approximately only 1/4 of the actually used conservation lands of Concord are now restricted to dogs on leash, while 3/4 require dogs to be only under voice control. Doesn't that seem like balanced and more than fair? The Commission has no plans to expand its regulations. How well under voice control actually will work will determine the course of their actions, not a non-binding regulation. I believe that the NRC has achieved a balance between the needs of preservation, human use, and canine use in our conservation lands, and I hope that you will join me in voting no on this article. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6.
Hello. Oh, good. I'm Susanna Bedell at 131 Carr Road.
Ms. Goodell.
And I'm not speaking as an important person in this town. I'm speaking as an optimist and as an old person. Many of you may know that over a third of the population in Concord is over 65. Our voice is not always heard. I think my optimism is that with a little time, and I am voting in favor of the moratorium, we can have better training of our dog owners and better communication with our town. But as an old person, I walk those trails, and when my dog has to be on leash, my life, especially in the winter, is in jeopardy. As anyone who knows the trails, they're roots and rocks and tunnels. And if you're old like I am, balance is a key thing. And I promote in my professional life prevention and physical activity, especially for old people where it matters tremendously. And my ability to continue my own preventive health care and the joy that I have in the dog is greatly limited by the leash law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Liza Carter, 34 Hubbard Street.
Ms. Carter.
I'm a graduate of the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. My first job was for one of the largest environmental legal nonprofits, NRDC, commenting on environmental impact statements on the federal level. I discovered that organizations would often cite research with a title that sounded applicable, even if it was irrelevant or contrary to the proposed action. And therefore, I carefully read all the studies listed on the NRC's website, only to find the same dynamic here. There was no research listed that supports Concord's position. We do not have nesting shorebirds in Punkatasset, nor the American crocodile, nor the New Zealand kiwi. The journal article cited most often in NRC's presentations the ecological impact of humans and dogs on wildlife in protected areas in Eastern North America, which studied 33 protected areas using camera traps, does not support their actions. One of the 4 conclusions highlighted from their article, and I quote, is, wildlife perceived free-ranging dogs as a relatively low threat. Obviously, there are parts of our planet where dog regulations are appropriate. Punkatasset is not one of them. And as a rabid conservationist myself, I believe in the value of protecting wildlife. However, using the issue of wildlife as a foil for achieving some other agenda, as such as being done here, is unethical. So why is the NRC trying to impose these regulations? The short answer is they're trying to limit the overall use of our conservation lands to placate abutters. This initiative started after members of the NRC held a private meeting with abutters in 2017 to discuss a strategy to deter off-leash dog walking in Estabrook. Since Concord's off-leash dog walkers are the majority of the users, that would have cut down on the overall in visitation. However, since placating abutters is not the mandate of the NRC, they had to find a justification. Wildlife protection in this case has been used as a proxy issue and a cover for their real purposes. It's not a victimless action. The NRC's restrictions would have huge negative ramifications on the many dog walkers in Concord. For many residents, walking in Punkatasset with our dogs is our church, our solace, our therapy, our gym, and our spiritual connection to the natural world.
And you're out of time.
Conservation land is a resource for all to enjoy, not just the wealthy abutters. Thank you.
Now, I want to mention that we're closing in on an hour on Article 44. And I think we've heard a lot of eloquence on both sides of the issue here. And we do have more work to do this evening, so I want you to consider carefully whether your particular point has already been made on either side of Article 44 as you approach the microphone. And if you think perhaps it has, then we might think about moving on to a vote. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Fred Martin at 226 Thoreau Street.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you. I hope to say a few things that haven't been said. I mean, I'm torn. I hear all the people who are telling stories about being attacked and scared by dogs. I know they're real. And I hear all the stories from people who talk about the joy and pleasure they take walking their dogs. I know that's real too. I'm mostly, I support the measure because I hope that we will still have open spaces. More in my own personal interest is socialization with all of you, my fellow citizens of Concord. I live directly across from Emerson Field. I take my dog there. She is more interested in meeting you than meeting your dogs. She'll play with your dogs. When she was little, she was more interested in the dogs. But I see off-leash dog walking as a community building activity, and I hope that we continue to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Craig McDonnell, 800 Old Road to 9 Acre Corner.
Mr. McInnell.
I live at the intersection of Williams Road, right across from Madison Field, where I walk my dog virtually every day, sometimes twice. I speak tonight in support of Article 44 as a former member and chair of the Natural Resources Commission. The main reason I support this article is that the process by which these regulations were promulgated was deeply flawed. So flawed, there were a lot of very upset people in this town, including the moms and the dads and the children whose families really relish the outdoor joy they get from being outside with their dogs off leash. So why are so many people upset? In essence, as I've written in the past, I believe that the NRC really rushed to judgment, that there was a dog problem when there really wasn't one. In essence, by fashioning a remedy in advance of identifying what the public really wanted and what the public could really integrate well, a solution they had in search of a problem. The process itself as well, I believe, was very anti-democratic and non-representative because the NRC decided for themselves what was right and ignored the members of the public who disagreed with them. Yes, the NRC had a number of meetings, 17 I believe, that created the perception but not the fact of actual public participation. Consider the following. An incredibly tiny amount of time at the regular NRC meetings were allowed for the public to speak. Approximately 36 hours of NRC meetings, only 115 minutes were allocated for public comment. That sliver of time was a tiny piece, 10 minutes on average per meeting. The rest of the time, the NRC spent discussing these matters with themselves. I'd suggest that what we do here is we urge the Board of Selectmen
Sir, you are out of time.
to work with the NRC, go back to the drawing board and get this right. Thank you very much.
Microphone number 6.
Thank you. John Flynn, 46 Miriam Road.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just want to give you a little history of my dog, Jerry. And I absolutely love Jerry. I got to tell you, dog lovers, you don't love your dog as much as I love Jerry. Okay? I got Jerry when I was 10 years old. Okay? He was a white Spitz mixed breed dog. And he was probably the meanest, ugliest dog who ever lived on this planet. And I loved him. He slept in my bed every night. And way back when we'd go to school in Saxonville, he would walk to school. We didn't have a leash. He walked with me in a fight with every dog on the way to school. There were a couple of cats that disappeared, and I can't say that Jerry did it, but who knows? So anyways, Jerry, you could do anything you want with Jerry. If you give him food, it was okay. But if you went to move his plate, he'd probably bit my arm off, much as I love this dog. And he loved me too. So at any rate, what we do sometimes is we forget, and I was very young, so I have to understand, all this stuff. Eventually, you have to deal with the fact that a dog is a dog. And if you're trying to do something special for these dogs, you love them, we all do, we all have, a lot of us have dogs, and I just want you to remember that Jerry was a mean son of a gun, and your dogs probably are too, although you don't know it. You think they're really good folks, but they're good folks to you, and Jerry was wonderful to me, but he wasn't to everybody else. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1. You think you can follow that?
No. Pam Swing, 54 Francis Street.
Ms. Spring.
Thank you. I would like to propose that we adopt the policy that Gloucester uses. What they do is they have 2 large beaches, and during the off-season, alternate days are off-leash or on-leash. So at one beach, it's on-leash, and at the other beach, it's off-leash.
So, ma'am, I'm going to actually stop you there because that's actually off-topic from the article.
Well, I don't think it is at all, because during this moratorium time, this would be a solution that's very elegant, very simple, and I think that it would actually satisfy both sides.
Okay, but what the meeting is debating this evening is whether to vote on this moratorium, not what should happen in terms of dog control. So I appreciate your thoughts, but I think they actually aren't germane, strictly speaking, to the article. But thank you very much. Are there any other points you wish to make?
Well, I'll be voting for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
Ann Humphrey, 468 Old Bedford Road. I've lived here for 45 years, so I feel almost like I'm a Concordian. So really, I just want to reiterate that, that this topic is not, about dogs per se and Jerry or, it's about the relationship of Concord citizens to the government. We have a town meeting form of government. I did not grow up with a town meeting form of government. I embraced it wholeheartedly. I was a member of several committees. At this point in time, I'm a member of the Dog Park Feasibility Study Committee, probably one of the longest names for one of the shortest committees. But I'm speaking for myself. In town meeting form of government, we citizens have an opportunity to participate one-on-one and one-to-one. And I fear this is a slippery slope, that when we are beginning to, we know that the Natural Resources Commission doesn't have to respond to Concord town government, but it is a slippery slope of, first of all, taking dog off-leash throughout the town, but it's also a slippery slope of restricting Concord individuals to participate, it could be a slippery slope, to participate in government affairs. As a town meeting, I would like to see these things, us be able to continue being able to speak and make decisions as citizens on the town meeting floor and not, and not lose our franchise, I guess you might say. And I want you to say that, I want you to remember that Thoreau walked all these fields and woods, and I love to do it too. In fact, just this morning I saw about a 75-pound coyote cross my path about 20 feet in front of me when I was walking around Gowing Swamp.
And you are out of time.
Okay, one last little thing. But Thoreau also would have wanted the individual rights to speak and be part of the town government.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name's John Conson. I'm at 625 Lowell Road.
Yes, sir.
So my thanks to everyone's efforts on this topic. I'm relatively new to this issue and to this article. And based on tonight's discourse, I'm startled to hear that there is a lack of facts behind the impact of dogs on leash in the areas designated. Not in the world, not in the nation, not in other natural areas, but again, in our town, in the designated areas that we're speaking about tonight. You know, we've all had both positive and negative experiences in our lifetimes with dogs, with laws, and with even our own neighbors. And these experiences often create great emotion. But there's one thing that I have learned through the years, and that is facts have a way of cutting through emotion. So let's get the facts, and I support this article. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Judy Terry, 368 College Road.
Ms. Terry.
I am looking at the map that was on the back of one of the handouts, and I see...
Could you get just a little closer to the
Sure,
microphone? Thank
sure.
you.
I'm looking at the map that's on the back of one of the handouts, and I'm seeing the pink and the green, the pink being leash required, and I'm confused because I don't know what this article is going to do. I thought I heard that anything going forward cannot be changed, but it shows right now that dogs have to be on leashes. If this article is voted yes, what impact does this have on Punkatassett?
Mr. Showbreeze, would you like to address that?
This article is non-binding, so it's...
I know that, and we've heard that 10 times so far.
Okay. So this is just a forum in which the town can request something of the NRC that they can take under advisement.
Mr. Showbreeze, I think the question is precisely what would there be a moratorium on?
Yes.
Oh, the intent was to have a moratorium on the changes that were made from December going forward.
That's the first time I've heard that. So Punkatassett would change from pink to green. Well, right now, yes.
There would be no more pink.
Okay. Shall we move to Ms. Terry? Are you all set there? Okay. Microphone number 5. Thank you.
Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace.
Mr. Banfield.
Madam Moderator, I call the question.
Okay, so we have been discussing this article for an hour and 12 minutes. So I think we're okay to have a vote on calling the question. This is a non-debatable motion. And if this motion carries, we will proceed to a vote on Article 44, and the quantum of vote required is 2/3. All those in favor of calling the question on Article 44? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion carries by well more than 2/3, and we'll now proceed to a vote. No demonstrations. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to to have a vote on Article 44.
Excuse me, please. Point of order, please.
Yes, point of order.
Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road.
And what is your point of order?
I wonder, I think there is some confusion among the people voting as to whether, I don't know that everyone understands that December is when the NRC passed the regulations that govern Punkatassett Road. Therefore, it is my understanding that this particular petition advises both that motion, both that action by the NRC, and all forward-moving action. And I just think that needs to be very clear to all voters.
Okay, so that's not exactly a point of order, but we will proceed to the vote, and I will remind you that this is in any event an advisory petition that the meeting will be voting on, and to the extent there's any confusion, I think you will find Mr. Showbreeze's PowerPoint presentation on the town website, and you can review it to see precisely what he means the intent to be. Okay, all those in favor of Article 44? Thank you. All those opposed? Ooh. All right, put your ballots down there. Let's see all those in favor again. All those opposed? So I think the motion carries, but it's really close. So I think we actually are going to have to count it. It's not going to help me. Sorry. We're actually going to have to, do you agree? I agree. Yeah, okay. Tellers, could you please get yourselves organized, and I will review with everybody what the procedure is for a standing counted vote.
Oh, please.
Yes, you can go down and vote if you'd like.
Oh, am I done?
Yeah, you're done.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so the procedure for the standing counted vote. The doors of the auditorium will be closed. No one is permitted to enter or leave during the count. Every voter needs to be in a seat. All voters need to be in a seat. And you can't be counted if you're hanging around standing at the back of the hall. When you vote, I will ask you to stand with your ballot, and the tellers will ask your row to sit down after they have counted your row. And when the tellers let us know that we're done with the votes in favor, we'll move on to the votes against. Mr. Fisher, where are you? Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. All those in favor of Article 44, please stand and hold your ballot up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Would all those opposed please stand and hold your ballot up?
We got one. Okay, you can sit down.
I think it's going to.
Okay, the tally is complete. The motion passes by a vote of 234 to 152, and thank you all for not clapping. I have no motion under Article 45 or 46. Accordingly, I declare that the meeting is taking no action on Article 45 or 46, and we will proceed to Article 47. There's still more to do, everyone. Could those of you who are departing please do so very quietly out of respect for the work we need to continue to do? Thank you very much. Good evening. Folks departing, please do so quietly. Thank you.
Lynn Salinger, 75 Pleasant Street, Chair of and speaking on behalf of the Light Board.
Ms. Salinger.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Could we have the first slide, please?
And we need a second on the motion, which is to take affirmative action on Article 47 as printed in the warrant. I see that we have one. Thank you.
As you see, Mr. Whalen moves that the town take affirmative action on this article, Article 47, as printed in the warrant, with authorization of a transfer of $461,000 from the light plant to the town to reduce the tax levy. With revenues and expenses forecast to provide a return of about 1.5%, approval of Article 47 will keep Concord Municipal Light Plant and Concord Broadband, two of our public enterprises, in business for the next year. Our light plant sells power to over 6,800 homes, as well as to businesses in the town, and Concord Broadband, which began service just 3 years ago, now services over 1,000 customers. Nearly 3/4 of light plant costs cover the wholesale purchase of power from a variety of conventional and renewable sources. Allow me to provide for you some background on our light plant's current programs and priorities. In Concord, nor'easters and tornadoes aside, we're fortunate to take electricity for granted. We flip the switch and the lights come on. Indeed, even most of the 300+ solar homes in Concord rely on the CMLP for power at night and on cloudy days. Our light plant enjoys a strong, favorable reputation among its customers, service is reliable, and rates compare favorably with those of other utilities. The light plant also partners with the community to educate customers about energy efficiency and energy-saving investments. Yet behind the switch, changing technologies, markets, and policies are creating challenges for the light plant that it must address to continue to deliver the reliable service we have long enjoyed. Concerns for the planet, successful energy efficiency and home solar programs, increasing supplies on the market of solar and wind, and the emergence of battery storage and electric cars are some of the forces with which CMLP must contend. So we are currently focused on several interlinked challenges. Concord households are strong adopters of solar technology, and CMLP supports customers' interests in green energy. This success has contributed to decreased power sales, a good thing, but it requires finding a better way to allocate the fixed costs of running the light plant across all who rely on the system. Town meeting last year, you will recall, called for reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. In response, CMLP's strategy will steadily increase the share of renewables in our power portfolio. As our electricity becomes more green, CMLP will encourage customers to use it for the two next largest greenhouse gas emitting activities, transportation and heating. HeatSmart launched recently, and you will hear more about other initiatives in the coming months. Since renewable power is more expensive, pursuing this strategy will mean higher energy costs. By how much will our electricity bills rise? That depends in part on energy prices and the rate at which we incorporate renewables into our power portfolio. Currently, those using higher volumes of power pay a higher per kilowatt rate. That multi-tier policy made sense when we sought to discourage consumption. But now, as we green our supply and encourage a shift to green electricity instead of fossil fuels, we will move to a single tier in price to avoid penalizing those who may choose to add an electric car or a heat pump. Finally, electricity is more expensive during peak daytime hours. To avoid increasing demand then, the rates will be set to encourage us to think in terms of time of use. It will be cheaper then to charge our cars or run our dishwashers or dryer at night or in the morning before noon. It's complicated, I know, and we all have a lot to learn. So to learn more, we on the Light Board invite you to attend an evening public meeting of the board, which will be held on Thursday, May 17, when you can hear more from us, and actually we can hear more from you. A formal rate hearing will be scheduled in June. Just know that your light plant professionals and Light Board, with input from other committed citizens who regularly attend our meetings, seek to do a number of things. Assure the light plant's financial stability, listen to and be transparent with the community, manage rate increases responsibly, especially for those among us who are least able to afford them, and honor the town's vision as we move toward a sustainable, reduced carbon footprint future. So, the Light Board urges you to vote affirmative action on Article 47. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 47. And are there questions or comments from the floor? Microphone number 6.
Colleen Humphreys, 400 Haywood Mill
Yes.
Road. May we please break the no clapping rule in honor of all the light plant workers?
May we please
break the clapping rule in honor of the light plant workers after this winter?
We may. They had a heck of a winter, didn't they?
It's been quite a winter. Thank you.
Okay, microphone number 4.
Well, she certainly stole my thunder. It's Ann Humphrey at 460 Old Bedford Road. I was just going to commend them so much for their work, and especially during that incredibly heavy storm that we had that brought down so many branches, trees, and the work that they did getting us all up, back, and running. But you said it better than I did.
Thank you. Mr. Wood, would you like to take a bow? Microphone number 2.
Brian Folds, 33 Riverdale.
Mr. Folds.
As one of those people that attends the Light Board meetings quite often and sees the work that you do every day, I did want to say thank you. This is a big transition for a very old institution, and your management of the cost, your ability to look forward is recognized, not only here in Concord, but it's also recognized by other communities that have municipal light plants. And we're setting a very good example. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6.
Sherry Fletcher, 102 Prairie Street.
Yes, proceed.
Thank you. Just a question, what happens if this doesn't pass to the rates of electricity and all of that? I understand what happens if it goes this way, but what if it doesn't pass?
Well,
just ask.
Do you know the answer to that? Or should we ask town council? Let's ask town council. Come on up, Mina.
Mina Macarius, Town Council. The answer is that you would, to fund the budget of the light plant, you would have to make it up somewhere else. The funds that were already invested in or that were collected by the light plant, I believe, are in an enterprise fund or the like of an enterprise fund, so they couldn't be spent on anything else. So really, this is appropriating funds that are already earmarked to this, but it's a procedural process you have to go through under state law.
Thank you. Well, seeing no other questions or comments, it appears that we're ready for a vote on Article 47. All those in favor of Article 47, thank you very much. All those opposed? Okay, I see that the motion carries by almost a unanimous vote, and I do so declare. Thank you. Articles 48, 49, and 50 having been addressed on the consent calendar, we will now proceed to Article 51.
Arthur Foreman, 64 Nurse Hill Road, member of the Public Works Commission, speaking for the Commission.
Mr. Fullman, let's get a second on the motion under Article 51. I see that we have one. Thank you.
Thank you,
Proceed.
Madam Moderator. This is a routine article that comes up every year, very similar to the one that just preceded this. It basically addresses the funding of the Water Department, a division of the Concord Public Works operation. I'm also going to speak a little bit about Nagog Pond, since that is our most important resource in terms of the water available to the community, and there has been quite a lot of activity on that subject. The first two slides indicate the basic program objectives: establishing reasonable competitive rates and hiring, training, and retaining a professional workforce. We work hard to comply with all regulations to achieve customer satisfaction and to provide for current and future needs of the citizens of Concord. The water system is comprised of close to $22 million in assets. The system services over 95% of the population of the town and the businesses of the town. System demands vary from day to day and season to season, and range from requiring 1.5 million gallons of water per day to 4 million gallons of water per day in the peak summer period. Nagog Pond has historically represented the single largest source of supply in the town. We also have 2 very large reservoirs and 6 wells. The next slide shows the major capital expenses for fiscal year 2019. These include work on the Nagog intake pipe, which is over 100 years old and needs replacement desperately. Some work on the design and permitting of Nagog treatment facility, replacement of mains in various sections of the community, work on the Nurse Hill Reservoir, an emergency generator for Kai's Road, and station equipment throughout the system. This next slide shows the allocation of water system expenditures. The total expenditures are $4.4 million. Revenues are in the order of anticipated revenues are in the order of $5.3 million. We have a step system in Concord so that the average user pays at the first step, and when you hit 1,200 cubic feet, I believe, of water usage, you pay a higher rate. This is, we're one of the few communities in the state that makes this sort of a conservation effort to charge those who use more a higher rate. And there are 3 steps, as I've noted. The rates will be reviewed in May at a public hearing. It's anticipated that they will be increased by approximately 4%. This represents $18.90 on average for users next year. This next slide shows how Concord's rates compare to some of our peer communities. Concord is represented by the red line. The other communities in this analysis are Lexington, Bedford, and Wellesley. I can tell you, having had offices in Malden and in Linfield, that the rates in Concord are very, very favorable. This next slide indicates our customer profile. You can see that 60% of our customers are residential users. Irrigation systems continue to pose a significant issue for the town's long-range water sustainability interests. This is an issue that we're addressing here in Concord and is also being addressed at the state level. We continue to face more and more regulatory challenges as they relate to water quality and quantity used. We don't expect this to get any easier. Let me take a few moments to further comment about Nagog Pond and the significant capital investment planned for that facility. You may recall that 2 years ago, I made a presentation to you for the funding of the intake pipe that I mentioned earlier, as well as a new up-to-date water treatment facility, which would be in compliance with state and federal regulations. Currently, Nagog operates, Nagog is the surface water supply, unlike our wells, and operates under a waiver from the federal EPA. We have to get that operation up to date with a fully operational and compliant treatment facility, and that is a lot about what's involved in our effort to get the appropriate permitting from Acton. That has been a major effort. It has not been easy, and it is still in process. It is also in litigation in that we received a permit in March of 2017. However, the conditions in that permit were quite onerous and, well, in our opinion, beyond the authority of the Acton Board of Selectmen, or Select Board. I believe they call themselves Selectmen to this day. Unlike groundwater supplies that have daily maximum withdrawal rates that are hydraulically limited by native sands and gravels, surface water systems like Nagog can be managed to allow for significant daily variations in withdrawal with minimal impact on the supply. At a time when there is an increasing value in maintaining water supply resiliency, a new word we heard a lot about this year, Nagog's hydraulic characteristics make it uniquely important in achieving that goal. It allows us to shift from the wells to the surface water supply. Sometimes a well is down, sometimes a well is not producing up to capacity. Currently, Nagog is that source which allows us to make sure that we have sufficient water supply, particularly in the summer months when we reach peaks. Concord's long-standing reliance on Nagog is shown in this next table. From 1909 to the 1950s, Nagog was used steadily in combination with the Sandy Pond Reservoir in Lincoln, serving most of Concord's supply. In the 1950s, Sandy Pond was abandoned, with system demand replaced with an increased reliance on Nagog and the introduction of a number of smaller yielding groundwater wells, the 6 wells that I mentioned previously. In the 1990s, federal regulation required the installation of costly surface water treatment systems, and this minimized Concord's use of Nagog Pond. That technology, which was ozone treatment, is no longer the state-of-the-art and is not one that is working particularly well for us, which again is why we need to replace and enhance the treatment facility. This next slide shows the critical importance of Nagog as it relates to the resiliency of Concord's water supply. As you can see, our average daily demand is approximately 2 million gallons per day. Our average summer demand is approximately $2.6 million per day, with summer peaks reaching as high as 3.4 million gallons per day for extended periods of time. The horizontal yellow band in this chart represents a range of system demands that can reliably be pumped with the availability of a properly treated Nagog Pond water supply. This equates to somewhere between 2.9 and 3.7 million gallons of water per day. The low level of the supply band in both cases assumes largest groundwater source available might be taken off, which would be one of the wells, I believe the Deaconess well. And so it wouldn't be using all of our supply. It makes the assumption that we may have a well that's down for a period of time. As shown on the slide, without Nagog Pond, the town would be unable to reliably provide for the average summer demands and would be precariously close to meeting average day demands. Without Nagog Pond, we would have very little choice but to initiate routine emergency water use declarations during the summer while increasing the potential of having year-round water use restrictions. This is not a prudent way to manage a water supply with this little margin. Concord's long-term planning, dating back decades, addresses this concern with the development of the Nagog Pond filtration plant, which will provide reliability and resiliency in Concord's water system. Please support Article 51 and our efforts on behalf of Nagog Pond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fullman. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee, if I did not already mention it, recommend affirmative action on Article 51. We'll open the floor for comments and questions. Microphone number 2.
Tim Rose, 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Mr. Rose.
I didn't get the exact figures written down, but did I see that the expenditures was something like 4.2 million, but the income was going to be 5 point something million, and yet we're going to have an increase in water? Did I not read that right? Or?
That is the rate. The 5.3, I believe, is the figure for income that we receive. And we have to take in more money than it costs for the operation because we have to replace mains and other capital assets that depreciate with time.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Microphone number 2.
Christian Kruger, 85 Alcott Road.
Mr. Kruger.
I was over in Acton for their town meeting, and I know that they're concerned about some environmental impacts on Nagog, pulling water during the summer when presumably their water levels would also be pretty low. Do we have any more information about that?
Mr. Fullman, do you want to address that?
The most recent Acton Town meeting reviewed, among other things, an intermunicipal agreement that had been drafted and approved by Concord's Select Board and the Public Works Commission, as well as the Acton Board of Selectmen. The purpose of that agreement was to work out an arrangement where Concord would provide water to existing customers on Route 2A, which it has done for many, many years, along with other customers that may need service of water on Route 2A with some aspect of development in the future.
Mr. Fullman, I think the specific question, though, is do the summer withdrawals from Nagog Pond adversely impact Acton groundwater reserves?
The answer to that is no, as far as I understand the situation. Acton Water District, which runs the Acton Water Program, has a separate supply. They do not currently draw any water from Acton Nagog Pond. We, in fact, supply water to Acton on that Route 2A area. So we're a supplier of part of their water, but it's not affecting the basic water supply of Acton.
A follow-up, Mr. Kruger?
Yes. I wasn't so much asking for the purposes of the water supply of Acton as I was the environmental impact, so the various ecosystems around Nagog Pond.
The regulation of water supplies is by the state and the State Water Department and the EPA. Those areas are very, very highly regulated. We have all sorts of reporting requirements to them with respect to impacts of our withdrawal of water, be it for Concord or for some use by Acton. So we're very intimately involved with the requirements of environmental compliance, and we make every effort to be ahead of the curve on that.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions or comments on the floor, it appears that we're ready for a vote on Article 51. Would all those in favor of Article 51 please hold up your ballots? Thank you very much. All those opposed? That is a unanimous vote. The motion carries, and I do so declare. And we'll now proceed to Article 52. Article 52 is the BD Swim and Fitness Center Enterprise Fund expenditures. The motion is on the screen. Do we have a second? I see that we do. Ms. Hodges will walk us through this.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Kate Hodges. I'm the Assistant Town Manager. Article 52 seeks authorization for the appropriation of funds necessary to sustain the BD Swim and Fitness Center. BD's overall operating expenses are projected to be about $2 million in fiscal year 20, Administration, which accounts for more than 50% of BD's expenses, includes salaries and benefits for 4 full-time staff members, including a general manager, an assistant to the general manager, a program coordinator, and a membership supervisor. Fees in this category also include front desk needs, including part-time earnings, electricity, which totals more than $170,000 for the year, natural gas at $75,000 a year, water and sewage charges averaging about $100,000 a year, and custodial services at about $200,000 a year. Water safety management related to lifeguard personnel and applicable supplies are represented as another area of cost here on the slide. Aquatic programs, shown here in green, represent swimming lesson expenses, including instructor salaries, and the remaining fields include fitness, personal training, and group exercise expenses. Revenues are also divided into categories. Membership fees account for nearly 2/3 of BD's revenues, the largest category at 63%. Aquatic programming, including swimming lessons, water aerobics, and swim teams, are for about 20%. Other monies collected for personal training and rentals account for a remainder of the revenues collected throughout the year, which is a total of a little less than 20%. BD operates as an enterprise fund governed by Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F and a half. These types of funds were established in an effort to give communities the ability to account separately for any and all financial activities associated with 4 fee types of operations, such as municipal utilities that we just heard about, and recreation centers. For BD, the town established this type of separate reporting system in order to account for any and all fees exchanged by, with, and at the center since it opened in 2006. As an enterprise fund, BD is mandated to fund the town's general fund expenses, including staff time from other divisions that contribute to the overall operation. Major divisions within Concord in this category include finance, treasury, accounting, human resources, and staff time at the town manager's office. Fees related to these costs are deducted from BD revenues at the end of each fiscal year as a lump sum. For fiscal year 19, we anticipate nearly $80,000 in chargebacks to the general fund. Also accounted for lump sum are BD's capital and depreciation liabilities. Each year, town meeting votes to accept capital plans as proposed by the town manager. Funding for these items are included within the plan or raised and appropriated either from within the levy limit or via borrowing authorizations made at town meeting. However, under the BD enterprise model, capital expenses are not budgeted or funded in this same manner. Instead, portions of the BD revenues are set aside according to a depreciation schedule assigned via their assets. By way of an example, we can refer to the $1.5 million HVAC system, which was installed at BD in 2015. With a useful life of about 20 years, this asset depreciates at a rate of $75,000 a year. So that money is taken from BD's operating revenues and put into the depreciation fund, which is used as needed to fund additional capital improvements and other large-scale operational needs, which may arise over the life of the center. If BD were to move ahead with all the capital planning projects and initiatives listed within the departmental wish list, the cost would total more than $817,000, and this is the number that you see here. This amount taken directly from the depreciation fund, which we refer to as the forced savings account, continues to boast a healthy balance of more than $1.3 million. However, even in years where BD's operational funds have been high, meaning maximum membership statistics and large revenues, not all projects that were outlined were completed. Instead, in conjunction with Recreation Director Ryan Kane, we plan to strategically choose a smaller amount of improvement projects which we believe will have the greatest benefit for membership and affordable given our financial status. The next fiscal year, we plan to initiate work on the dive stance and some tile work in and around the pool deck. We anticipate using far less than the nearly $800,000 indicated here. However, in order to comply best with the enterprise model for funding, we must seek town meeting's authorization for the full amount of capital necessary to complete all the projects.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hodges. I've been asked to read for you a statement from the chair of the Recreation Commission, Peter Hunter, on behalf of the Recreation Commission, which on Article 52. On behalf of the Recreation Commission, I would like to express our enthusiastic commitment to continuously improve the facility, programs, and overall environment of the BD Center, which will in turn improve its financial position and viability. Since its opening in April of 2006, 12 years ago this month, the Beatty Center has been at the center of the town of Concord's health, wellness, and fitness ecosystem. With its well-maintained facility that includes an Olympic-sized pool and state-of-the-art fitness and cardio equipment, Beatty has the capacity and capability to provide the town of Concord with a great health and fitness resource for all of its citizens. Admittedly, however, over the past few years, the Beatty Center has not done enough to attract all constituencies, especially young families and family membership in general. Family membership has decreased over 20% in the last 3 years, which is an unacceptable rate of decline. We believe that we have a good understanding of the shortfalls that have caused this decline in membership, and we are taking steps to make significant improvements. The Recreation Commission firmly believes that with the right leadership, staff improvements and training, a robust marketing campaign, and most importantly, a commitment to provide best-in-class programs for families as well as for all other members, we will significantly increase membership and provide the financial resources to continuously invest in the facility and the town's health and well-being for the years to come. The Select Board and the Finance Committee both recommend affirmative action on Article 52. Are there questions or comments from the floor? Microphone number 5.
Thank you. Oops, thank you, Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road.
Ms.
Kate,
Proctor.
Kate, thank you for that fantastic presentation. At the public hearing, I thought that it was reported that it was about a $93,000 deficit that the Beatty Fund was running at this, projected to run next year. What happened to that? How did that disappear? How was that resolved? And can you explain? Can you explain that? Thank you.
Sure. The initial numbers that came out at the budget presentations or the hearings some weeks back didn't include the full amount for the capital projects. So what we've proposed as far as the budget is we were projecting that revenues will exceed expenses by about $50,000. However, as I explained in the presentation, one of the things that we have to take into account is the full weight of our depreciation expenses, which is about $800,000, and then the chargebacks to the general fund. We've made a number of changes, and we're still in negotiations with working with some of the other town departments to see if we can decrease the number for the chargebacks, and we feel like we'll be successful to do that. In addition, Ryan and I have outlined a small portion of capital projects, which are only going to equate to about $250,000 to $300,000, and those will be staged by quarter, depending on how we're doing financially with membership fees. So we have to represent the full weight if we were to do every capital project, but that isn't our plan as of right now.
Any other questions or comments on Article 52? Hearing none, come on up.
So, Sherry Fletcher, 102 Prairie Street.
Yes, proceed.
I'm a little, I don't understand, you're asking for a sum of money to subsidize the budget, and where's this money coming from? From the taxes, or?
No, there's no money from the taxes.
So where's the money coming from?
So the $2 million and change is the revenues that we plan to take in from membership fees and other programs that we do.
Yep.
The $824,000 is taken from Beatty's depreciation fund. We contribute to that, so we equate it to essentially if you have your own personal savings account.
Yeah.
So we're taking $2 million from money that we collect throughout the year, and then we're taking $824,000 from Beatty's savings account. None of that is tax money.
Okay. So, so what's the vote regarding then? Why do we have to approve this?
Maybe we'll have town council explain why it's necessary to have a vote on the enterprise fund.
Madam Moderator, this is another feature of state law for enterprise funds. Again, as Ms. Hodges explained, the money is expected to be spent from the income that comes into the enterprise. However, town meeting is asked to authorize it. The total amount that could actually be be used. If there's a shortfall in the income, you could actually see it from the tax levy. However, as was represented, that's not the intention because they're doing the phasing of the capital projects.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6.
Yes, Sheldon Hines, 74 The Valley Road.
Yes, sir.
I have several questions. Is the $824,000 the total of the accumulated depreciation that hasn't been spent? In other words, it's cash that's available over the years since it opened? And secondly, will we be needing to do a similar thing next year and the year after that? And did we do something similar to this last year with an amount as large as $800,000? I just don't know why that number is so large in 1 year. And how does that compare? And it's just confusing to see such a large amount all at once.
Ms. Hodges?
Yes. The total depreciation account has about $1.3 million in it. Last year, we authorized around $600,000, but we actually only ended up spending $320,000. So while we're asking for authorization, again, that would be if we were going to do every project that is necessary, and we're not. We're going to have to phase that. As far as what would happen if we allocated $800,000 every year and spent the same amount, you're absolutely correct. The money would run out, unless for some reason we have a run on revenues that come in. So I encourage people to join the Beatty Center. But that's what would happen. So we're taking the $824,000 from the 1.3, and whatever we don't use remains in the depreciation account until we expend it. So our goal is to continuously contribute to the depreciation fund.
Microphone number 6, a follow-up question, sir?
Yes, so there will be about $500,000 left at this point, and each year thereafter more will be added to it based upon the depreciation schedule. And in future years, there may, and you expect to spend this all in projects that have been defined, even though it won't all be spent this year. Is that correct?
Correct. We put away, what my example in the presentation was for the HVAC system. We put away about $75,000 a year, knowing that 18 years from now we're going to need to replace it at a cost that's going to be higher than the original 1.5. So yes, the idea is to have that as a separate type of revolving account within the enterprise to be able to take care of the building's capital needs.
Thank you very much. One more question?
Merrill Schwartz.
Wait, Ms. Hodges, don't go away.
1471 Main Street. I just had...
Ms. Schwartz?
Yes, thank you. I just have a question regarding what seems to be, and I know it was very quick, the high administrative costs and the cost to the average citizen in Concord for membership. I know it's an enterprise fund, and the costs are all determined by the budgetary needs, but it just seems that you're basing it on increased membership, and a lot of people feel that the membership is already at a very high cost, and I'm just wondering how viable your plan is to be able to continue offering membership to citizens who perhaps can't afford it.
Ms. Hodges?
Thank you. The amount of revenue that was projected is based on this year's. We have, to quote the Recreation Director, been conservative on both revenues and expenditures. As far as the administrative costs, the Beatty Center used to have 7 full-time benefit-eligible staff members. This budget calls for 4. So we're decreasing costs and becoming more efficient as we can. The center is open from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day of the week. The electricity, other than personnel costs, the electricity and the need to clean it and be able to run the pool 24/7 essentially is a driving factor, and so we have to base that with our memberships. Last year, you may recall that we rolled out 3-month membership and 10 Punch Pass membership cards. We saw a pretty good increase in revenue that came in from that, but we didn't budget anything to project that. We just used last year's numbers. And as far as that, we're trying to look at like facilities such as the Thoreau Club and other ones like that. We have a hard time comparing to the Planet Fitnesses and the Gold's Gym and the $10 Anytime Fitness. It's just a different type of facility, and the cost of running a pool is tremendous. So I should just note that we're not raising fees for membership this year, nor did we last year. So we're trying our best.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
George Corrett, 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett.
Madam Moderator, I'm wondering if I read it right, that the administrative salaries were a little over $1 million in the pie chart, and that's for 4 personnel? No, it can't be right.
No. That is for, so the administrative salaries, it's budgeted for almost $1,989,000, and that includes 4 full-time personnel, all of the lifeguard staff, the front desk staff, the custodians, the fitness trainers, swim program folks, health insurance, life insurance, dental, other post-employment benefits, Medicare, Social Security, overtime, and unemployment, which we hope not to have every year, but.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, it looks like now we're ready for a vote on Article 52. All those in favor of Article 52, please raise your ballots. Thank you. All those opposed? I see that the motion carries by a near unanimous vote, and I do so declare. And we have no motion under Article 53. Accordingly, I declare that the meeting is taking no action on Article 53, and we are now ready for a motion to adjourn. And is there a second? All in favor? See you next year.